Okay. We'll go ahead and handing out some of the short memo and the supporting documents. We did meet earlier today, and for FY 2022, the estimates that we have total $8.8 billion. It's a decrease of $67.1 million, or less than 1% from the November estimate, and a decrease of 63 million, or a little less than 1% relative to the 21 actual receipts. And I know everybody's getting tired of hearing this. So this will be the last time that I think that we have to talk about this. But 21 actual receipts were inflated due to the shift of payment deadlines in 2020 into 2021. So that's artificially high. So this difference is artificially low. Revisions include a reduction in net transfers to the state general fund of $500,000 or $500 million because of the transfer to the budget stabilization fund provided in 267. And taxes only increased that amount by 411 from the previous November estimate, about 4.6%. For 23, the revised total estimates are almost $9.5 billion. It's an increase of 407.8 million, or 4.5% increase relative to the November estimate, and an increase of 652 million, or 7.4% relative to the newly revised 22 estimates. We had some discussion, and really the big impact on state receipts is really around inflation. In the short term, it's really positive to receipts, but it could be really destabilizing if that is a continued long-term trend. There has been very high levels of inflation over the past few months. March, the year over year, was a 8.5% increase, highest since the early 80s. Like we talked about, in the near term, inflation is going to increase state receipts. You buy groceries, you buy a car, you buy clothing. 6% inflation, you're paying more. State receipts are going to be going up for sales tax. To help mitigate those increases, wages are going up. So as those wages go up, withholding taxes go up. So in the short term, both of those we are showing as increasing. But in the long term, if those trends continue, we'll have some really deep problems with the overheating. If we have sharp corrections in monetary interest increases, if there's diminishing demand because of the higher prices, that's really when it sets some big changes in those out years. We're looking at a 15-month period. So over that 15-month period, we don't think any of these long-term issues are going to be showing. And if they are going to show, we would anticipate those to show in November of next year. So until that point in time, we have not included any of those type of serious risks, impacts in these estimates. And we're not saying that those are going to happen afterwards either. So what has changed since the previous estimates? Really, the big change was before we were worried about COVID-19 and what was going to happen with COVID-19. That has calmed down and has since been replaced with inflation. Inflation, we have The previous estimate for inflation was 3.7. We increased that to 5.5%. Real GDP, we previously had it at 3.6. We dropped it down to a little over 2.6 million or 2.6%. Nominal GDP from 7.3 to 7.2. So the amount of inflation or growth in the GDP that we're anticipating is still, close to that. It's just being offset by that higher inflation when we talk about the real GDP, which is nominal minus inflation. And for 23, these are calendar years. The old estimate was a little over 2.8, and inflation now we have at a little over 2.9. Real GDP 2.5 to 2.25%, and nominal GDP from 5.33% down to 5.2%. Employment, it's slowed the latter part of 21 and into 2022. And payroll growth seems to be constrained by the pool of available workers. Unemployment rate for the month of February sit at 2.5%, lowest in the information that we could find. However, the labor force rate has not yet recovered to that pre-pandemic level, so unemployment is low, but the total amount of participation is not back to where it was before pandemic either. So forecasting, we have unemployment at 3.2% for 22 and 23. U.S. is for 3.5 for 22 and 23 both. The agriculture economy, commodity prices are really supporting the farm economy now, but high input costs, really around oil, supply chain issues, reduced federal aid are outweighing those commodity prices. So net income from farms are projected to drop nationally and in Kansas in 2022. Though exports exceeded $5 billion for the first time in 21 and 22. But longer term, we're not expecting those to stay at that higher level. We're expecting those to drop back down to that $3.5 to $4 billion range. Oil and gas, recent prices for both oil and gas are projected to temporarily slow or even stop long-term decline in oil and gas production. They're responding to those higher prices and then going ahead and producing greater volumes of both oil and gas. For crude oil, our estimate is $72 a barrel, up from $65 in the fall estimate. For 23, we have that going up to $77 a gallon or barrel. A gallon. It only feels that way. Forecasted natural gas prices, $3.70 per MCF, going up to $4.70 in 22, and $3.10 MCF going up to $4.20 in 23. We looked at jobs in the manufacturing sector continues to really struggle in the recovery. They lost almost 18,000 jobs, and through March, they've only recovered about 68% of those. And what's really slowing things down are the production of durable goods, which includes aviation manufacturing. And they're still facing difficulties going into the pandemic with the 737 MAX issues impacting the Wichita area as well. We do include the bills that have passed in this estimate. So these estimates include the effect of House Bill 2239, the tax bill, and Senate Bill 267, which is the budget bill, which was signed this morning. So those are included in the estimates. So that's a quick overview. Always want to stop at the very end here and say, I really want to thank all the people who contributed to the process. It's not one meeting; it's basically a couple weeks worth of meetings. Really like to thank the Department of Revenue, Department of Agriculture, Department of Labor, the Pooled Money Investment Board, the Department of Insurance, and people from the oil and gas industry, KU, K-State, Wichita State, and then the staffs of the Division of Budget and Research as well. Really, a lot of people put a lot of hard work into providing the information that we have, and it couldn't be done without any of that information provided from them. Anything to add?
Yeah, thank you, JG. I would echo those comments specifically about all the work and partnership that goes into these meetings. We don't enter these meetings on the same page at all times, but we have a lot of robust discussion and we compare data points and appreciate everybody's perspectives and feel that we get a well-rounded perspective of what's happening across the state and come to a very good consensus at the end. We do agree on all the numbers coming out of these. JG did touch on some of the headwinds and tailwinds, if you will, of what could change the numbers going forward. Inflation is clearly probably front and center of everybody's mind right now with the recent BLS reports that have come out in the last couple of weeks. Has not slowed down. The Fed, seems to be taking steps to try to address it at this point. You could question the timing if you would like to. But the good news is, even with the inflation running as high as it is right now, the real GDP for the state of Kansas is forecasted well into the positive territory. So a lot of good things happening across the Kansas economy. A lot of folks are at work. A lot of folks are making money. And then, the impacts of this from a budget perspective obviously help the state budget. JG mentioned the bills that are included or not included in the forecasts that are out there, but I can't get out of this room without making another plug, specifically with inflation happening, that this does reaffirm the governor's position that we can clearly, immediately repeal the entirety of the state level food sales tax on groceries in Kansas effective July 1. These numbers do put enough into the cushion there. So with that, I think we're ready for questions.
Okay. And one of the things I do want to talk about, and yeah, this does include all the bills that have passed, and the consensus revenue estimates did increase, 700, $760 million in ending balance. But one of the things that do want to talk about, we talked about the bills that were included, some of the items that were not included. In conference committee right now, there's $1 billion in capers, transfers to capers that's not included. The food sales tax bill is not included. There's another tax bill, 2597, that is not included in this. So when you add those bills into the mix, that would drop still a very large number, but that would drop that ending balance in 23 to over $1.7 billion. Correct. Yeah, if you notice, I said that we included all of the things that have passed. The one thing that we did not include in here is K-12. So if you look right below the total adjustments, education sub for House Bill 2567, that is the education budget. So there is money in here for education. It fully funds all of the stuff that was requested as far as Gannon and the courts go. Not yet. Well, I mean, it's going to increase them, but well, I mean, when we had the additional revenue coming in, if you can include everything that was included before, it's going to increase those ending balances. But no, those we haven't put anything together on any type of estimates on what those increases may or may not be. We were kind of rushing to get everything ready for this meeting.
So thank you, John. The question was kind of reiterating the governor's position that we can fully afford to fully eliminate the food sales tax effective July 1. And then also, does it leave room for the rebate? I'll answer the first question. Yes, this absolutely demonstrates that we have plenty of room in the budget to fully eliminate the state level sales tax on food effective July 1, 2022. Department of Revenue's indicated that they still have plenty of time to implement those changes by July 1, 2022. So time is not an issue and money is certainly not an issue. As it relates to the rebate, I think the legislature took that out of the mega bill. The governor did propose the $250 direct payment to Kansans. The legislature took that out. Should that make its way back in at some point, that there would be, yes, it looks like there would be money for that. So, we'd have to run the numbers again. I'm just looking at the food sales tax and where that's at. And JG talked about what bills are or not in the profile here. So the question is about the special education funding and if we have enough room to get the 92% of excess costs. I think the answer to pretty much any question is if you're just talking pure mathematics, right? You can have any idea that is less than what the ending balance is, and that idea could fit into a profile, right? But when you start putting everything on the page at the same time, at some point those numbers exceed what the ending balance becomes. As it relates to the special education, I think there was a couple of pushes throughout session to try to get the funding in at a lower level than 155 million, and those were unsuccessful.
And I mean, one other thing I do want to add to the conversation is that, while we may have that ending balance in 23, doesn't mean that that will continue in 24, 25, and 26 in those out years as well. Yeah. The question is, in the long term, where do we hit that crash? And I mean, right now we have not done any estimates. We have not revised any of the revenue estimates for any of those out years. So I'm not sure that we could say when that will or will not impact those out years. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that we'd say it was tied to any one specific, as far as corporation goes, sector. It's just that in in the not too distant past, we saw corporate income in that $400 million range, and over the last, a little bit last year, and then in the current year, it's just exploded. We do not believe that those corporate incomes can stay at that $725 million level. So we just were projecting those to slowly start to drop down. Probably not.
Yeah, so if I can take that a step further on the corporate, what JG said is absolutely accurate. So as it relates to corporate, if you look back over the past 15 years of the corporate line specifically, it's pretty flat, right? Between 300, maybe $450 million year over year. It's not on a linear growth, such as a sales or an income tax, right? So corporate is different than the others in as much as there's a baseline there. And we've got about 15 years, 20 years of data to suggest that it should be at one baseline level. We have 18 months of data showing that it's at a different baseline right now. So we're not confident yet to forecast that out as the new baseline. We're pulling that back down. But on the other revenue sources, individual income, you see a pretty consistent growth in time, sales tax, and there's certainly correlation with inflation and GDP at the various levels. Well, I think those business investments would manifest themselves in various streams of revenue, right? If we're bringing new net new jobs into the state, new individuals into the state, they're going to be buying stuff. So sales goes up, individual income goes up, depending on how these businesses are incorporated. It could be on the corporate side if revenues go up, or maybe on the individual side, because some businesses pay on the individual side and some pay on the corporate line. It's not all corporate. So I think it permeates all the way through the revenue stream. So over time. I don't believe they're in here at all. Right.
The question was, if we get that, would it impact these numbers in the short term? No, that investment starts to build over time. And I think in some of the estimates that we have, not, it wasn't a fiscal note, but in some of the estimates, it was only like 19, $20 million in 23 if we got it. And then it would start to increase in those out years.
Yeah. So the question is, why is inflation, if I can recapture it, why is inflation not bringing down the fiscal 23 revenue forecast? I think, and it's a great question. And JG touched on this in his opening comments, that, inflation is certainly something that we're looking at right now and considering and looking at in their macro economy. And at some point, there very well could be a tipping point whereby you get diminishing returns. What the economists have helped us find is a couple of things. One, obviously, there is a correlation with sales revenues and inflation. As inflation happens, prices go up, therefore, the tax on the base goes up, right? There's also a correlation on the individual income side that they found that there's a pretty direct correlation between nominal state GDP and individual income tax, nominal having inflation built on top of the real GDP. So as inflation builds and GDP goes up, the correlation to individual is that also goes up. So we're following the model that's been proven out over the last 15 years, absent about a 3-year window. But you're right, Brad. At some point, we need to just, we don't blindly follow these models. There's a lot of discussion, and we talk about, at some point, is there a tipping point where things revert back? Oh, well, I certainly don't want to answer for the governor because then I'll answer to the governor. But yeah, by statute, there's a 7.5% ending balance. Clearly, that's the low water mark at the very minimum. The governor is more interested in making sure that the budget itself is stable and sustainable. So ensuring that, long term we have structural balance and that, we've part of this year's push was to remove some of the budget gimmicks. Gimmicks is a bad word. Some of the budget maneuvers that have been implemented in the past. So trying to ensure that the budget is stable and self-sustainable moving forward. But no, I'm not going to commit to a number.
On the profile that we have here, the $3 billion is the ending balance. And in addition to that, in a budget stabilization fund that's off to the side is another $500 million.
Not with us today, no. Probably about two more questions. As a snapshot in at a point in time today, as we sit here on April 20th, the after paying for K-12 education and what's in the mega bill, there's $3.1 billion in the ending balance plus $500 million in the stabilization fund. I just like, well, I'll say it. As you're looking at what you can spend in your personal account, you don't look at what's in your checking account today. You forecast out what your needs are going to be over time and how much you have coming in.
And I do want to remind people that, Ways and Means and Appropriations are coming back in tomorrow to look at all of the other bills that have passed and the stuff that they've not dealt with and put off to omnibus to put another appropriation bill together. So there will be some additional changes between now and then.
Thank you all very much. Really appreciate the time.